Hi everyone, it's Sam Little here from Phnom Penh in Cambodia. So great to once again be able to preach to you guys through the power of the internet. Thank you to Dave and Nick for allowing me to share with you guys today. It's so great to do this. I'm so grateful. I'm looking today at a story from the book of Mark. It's Mark chapter 1 and it's verse 40. It's a story that you might know. Where Jesus heals a man from leprosy. I've actually preached on this before at Silklife, but since coming to Cambodia and since thinking about the Christian faith living in a different culture, or that's more like the culture of the Bible than the UK, and reading about what they call an unashamed culture, it's helped me to rethink a bit about the end of this story, which I never really gave much attention to. So hopefully that will help you guys too. And there are two shocking moments in this story that I want to try and help us understand. So I'm going to read the story, try and explain it a bit, and then I've just got three ways that we can think differently, hopefully, about our lives because of this story. So it's Mark chapter 1, verse 40. It says this, "And a leper came to him," that's Jesus, "imploring him and kneeling, said to him, 'If you will, you can make me clean.' Moved with pity," that's like compassion, "he stretched out his hand and touched him and said, 'I am willing, be clean.' And immediately the leprosy left him and he was made clean. And Jesus warned him and sent him away at once, saying, 'See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof to them.'" Jesus, at this point in the book of Mark, is early on in the 3 years of his public ministry, where he goes around healing people that are sick, setting people free from the power of evil spirits, and proclaiming that the kingdom of God has come to the earth in the person of Jesus. He is in the northern part of the country, he's up north, and word is getting out about his power to heal people. Into the story steps a man with leprosy. Because we live 2,000 years beyond the time of the Bible, I guess we won't really understand to full extent what that means, a man with leprosy. Leprosy is and was a very, very extreme and serious condition. It affected your skin and it affected your nerves. And if you got leprosy, it would just keep spreading and spreading throughout your body. On your skin, there'll be all kinds of blisters and boils and rough parts of your skin. It would look really unpleasant. It can affect your nerves, so your sense of balance isn't very good. It can even mean that your eyelids don't work and you can't blink, and so you get all kinds of dust in your eyes. It can make your hair fall out. It can mean that your hands and fingers get trapped in a disfigured way. And even parts of your hands, fingers, toes might even begin to fall off. So it was painful. It meant that you looked unpleasant. And it meant that you were cut off from the rest of your village or your town. So if you had leprosy, you couldn't just keep living in your family home, or you couldn't keep working in your job. You had to go and either live with other lepers outside of town or live on your own, just on the edge of your village, the edge of your town. It meant that you were cut off also from the religious life of the people of Israel. You couldn't go to the synagogue and join in with the worship of God. You couldn't join the rest of your town and go down to Jerusalem to the big temple for the religious festivals that happen throughout the year. Leprosy was painful for your body. It meant that you were cut off from other people. You were a religious outcast. And in the book of Leviticus, we read that if you have leprosy, you had to cover the bottom part of your face, a bit like having a face mask in the times of coronavirus. You had to let your hair grow out and be messy and wear not nice clothes. And if somebody comes near you, even though you're on the edge of town, you had to say to them, I'm unclean, don't come near me. Just imagine the pain and the shame of saying that when someone is finally getting close to you after you've been shut off from people for weeks, months, maybe years, maybe decades. This man, the leper in the story, does something incredibly brave. He breaks ranks. He leaves where he can spend his time on his own or with other lepers, and he goes to find Jesus because he's heard about this healer called Jesus. He's brave because he had to maybe go through villages, towns, go on a road, on a path. And if other people saw him, they might really be offended and scared and really angry with him. They might say, hey, leper, what are you doing? Get out of here. So the man runs the risk of being offended by other people, maybe being hurt by other people. He's just so desperate to get to Jesus. He finds Jesus, and in desperation, he gets on his knees. And he's begging Jesus. He doesn't ever say to Jesus, if you can help me. He says, if you are willing. There's some kind of faith in his heart already that Jesus has the power to heal him. The question is, would Jesus take notice of a leper like him? So what the man does is shocking. He goes on this journey to find Jesus, risking the response of other people who wouldn't like him doing that. Jesus is moved with pity or compassion. It's like a feeling in the guts where Jesus looks down at this poor man on his knees, this man in pain, this social outcast, this religious outcast. And Jesus feels pain for him, this man made in the image of God, yet in such suffering. In Jesus, we see the heart of God for suffering people, even outcasts that nobody else would want to be near. Jesus himself then does something shocking. He reaches out his hand and he touches the leper, but he puts his hand on his shoulder. This is the first time, maybe for years, maybe even decades, that anyone has touched this man. Can you imagine what it felt like? Jesus wants to affirm to this man, yes, I have the power, and yes, you matter. You wouldn't ever touch a leper because that would make you unclean spiritually. But Jesus, who is the holy God in a man, entirely God and entirely man, there's as much chance of this leper making Jesus unclean as there is one drop of rain making someone soaking wet through to the bone. So Jesus feels compassion. He touches the man. Then he says, I am willing. I care about you. And immediately the leprosy is gone. Wouldn't you love to have seen this man in that moment as maybe his hair that might have come out, his hair grows back in an instant. Maybe his eyelids start working and he can blink for the first time in years. The boils on his skin, the blisters vanish and his skin is fresh and clean and smooth. Maybe his hands are suddenly free and he can move his fingers for the first time. Imagine how this man felt. He's been approved and affirmed by Jesus. He's been touched by Jesus. Now he has been healed by Jesus. This is a miracle that comes from the heart of God, from the power of God, from Jesus Christ to this poor outcast, this leper. It's a miracle. That's where I used to think the story really ended. But Jesus then says two more things. He tells the man, firstly, hey, this is between you and me. Don't go and tell everyone about this. Why does Jesus do that? Well, he's still early on in his 3 years of ministry, and there are all kinds of confusing ideas going around about who Jesus is. Some think he is Elijah. Some think he's John the Baptist resurrected. People are confused about who he is. Jesus doesn't want another person spreading another potentially confusing message about his identity. Jesus wants to be the one that tells people who he is. Also, Jesus is still traveling from town to town, village to village. He wants to be free to move around. If the word is getting out so much, then maybe crowds are coming and trapping him, and he's not free to travel, and that is actually what happens. Jesus also tells this man to go and see a priest. Now, I never used to understand this. I used to just gloss over this bit. Why is this important? Well, either there be a priest perhaps in the north of Israel traveling around the synagogues, or there'd be a priest in Jerusalem, and the man would have to go down to the temple in Jerusalem. But the priest has the spiritual authority and the duty to inspect this man, to see that he has been cleaned from leprosy, a miracle. And this priest would then do like a public ceremony where he'd make sacrifices on behalf of the man. He'd put some oil on the man's head, and the priest would then declare this man was covered in leprosy and now is clean. There's like an affirmation of what Jesus has done for this man. Because imagine if the man doesn't go and see the priest and just goes back to his village. And he says, hey, look, it's me. Look, my hair's back. My skin's fine. I can move my fingers. I've been healed. And people might think, well, okay, it's great to see you and you do look better, but maybe you stay outside the camp for a few more days. And hey, maybe if you're like this next week, well, then you come back in. But having gone to see the priest, he can say, the priest has declared that I am clean. I am now back in. You see, Jesus wanted this man to be healed from his leprosy. He wants the priests to know that he is on the earth bringing the power of God to people. And he wants this man to be welcomed back into his village or town, into family life, into social life, but also into religious life. He wants this man to be able to go to the synagogue in the nearest town and to go with the people of God down to Jerusalem for the religious festivals like the Passover. Maybe this man was there in Jerusalem for the Passover when Jesus died on a cross. Maybe the man saw and thought, this is the guy that healed me. You see, this story is about a man who was unclean being made clean. But it is also a story about a man who was an outsider, who is made an insider because of the role of a priest. In Cambodia, the culture here is much more like the culture of the Bible than the UK. In the UK and in the West, we have a big belief in being an individual, following your heart, living life your own way, marching to your own drumbeat. We have songs like, it's my life, don't you forget it, I did things my way. In Cambodia, it's different to that. In Cambodia, the aim isn't to be an individual, the aim is to fit in with the group around you. I have not met a single Cambodian female who has anything other than long black hair. That is the one hairstyle that seems to be acceptable in Cambodia, where the idea is to look like other people and to be part of the group. But in Cambodia, like in many cultures, if for some reason you become an outsider, if you turn away from your family's way of doing things and then you want to come back into the group, you can't simply come back. You need someone of a high social status to recognize and bring you back into the group. Let's think about the story of the prodigal son, where you have a dad with two sons, and the younger son is really offensive. He says to his dad, I basically wish you were dead. I want to get out of here and I want my inheritance now. This brings shame on his family. The dad, against the odds, agrees. The son takes his inheritance, probably some land, sells the land, which he just didn't do, takes the money and goes and spends it on wild living. Sometime later, he comes to his senses. What am I doing? I've got no money. I'm living like a pig. And he makes his way humbly back to his hometown, thinking, if only I can live like a servant on my dad's farm. The dad is looking on the horizon for his son. And when he sees him approaching, the dad runs to meet his son. Now, have you ever wondered why the dad runs? One reason is this. In Cambodian culture, in the culture of the Bible, if someone represents shame, what you do is you cover the shame and you get rid of the shame. This young man, he brought shame on the whole village, shame on the town, shame on the family. And you don't let shame go undealt with. You get rid of shame, you cover it up. And so this dad would have known that if maybe some of the young lads or maybe some of the older men, if they see this son coming back, they might think, oh look, here he comes, the reject. And look, he hasn't even come back with any gifts to try and make amends. He's come empty-handed. They might say to him, look, you turn around and you go back the way you came. You are not welcome here. We are done with you. The man brought shame on the village. He couldn't just come back. But the dad, who has a higher social role, he does something physical. He puts a ring on the finger of the son, a robe on his back, sandals on his feet. He then has a party and invites the whole village to come and affirm that the dad has the power to say this son was an outsider and is now an insider. The dad in that story plays a similar role to what the priest does with the man healed from leprosy. He has the spiritual authority to say this man was an outsider, he's now an insider. He's now back in the religious life of Israel, the social life of his village or his town. So that's the story. A miracle, Jesus healing this man from leprosy. Two shocking moments with this important part at the end of the priest having a role in recognizing a miracle has been done and then establishing this man is now back on the inside. Let me just share with us 3 ways in which the story can help us think differently about our faith. Number 1, Jesus, who is God, who is eternal, means he had no origin, he has always existed. Jesus leaves heaven, a place where he was worshipped, perfectly safe in the love of his Father. He comes to the earth, and from the very start, he makes himself so low. He's born in Bethlehem. He's born to poor parents. He's born in scandal. He's placed in a manger. He has shepherds come and visit him. They were the lowest of the low. Jesus, when he dies on a cross in shame and humiliation, he does so not in Jerusalem. He does so outside of the city gate, outside of the camp we read in the book of Hebrews. In other words, to cleanse us from our sin, to bring us into God's family, Jesus becomes an outsider. And on the cross, Jesus cries out to his Father, my God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus, in some mysterious way, experiences even being cut off from his Father in heaven as he takes our sin on himself. Jesus becomes an outsider that we might be brought in. Jesus is also our great high priest, according to the book of Hebrews. In other words, Jesus has spiritual authority to declare that because we have been set free from the power of sin and made clean before God, Jesus can declare to all other spiritual powers that we have been taken from the kingdom of darkness and transferred into his kingdom. That once we were not a people, now we are the people of God. Once we were spiritual orphans, now we have been adopted into God's family. Just like the priest in our story, just like the father with his wayward son, Jesus, the great high priest, can declare, we were outsiders, now we have been brought in. This is what Jesus has done for you and for me. And once Jesus makes that declaration, it cannot be overturned or even questioned. Secondly, let's think about how this story helps us think about our role within our church families. One of the reasons why it's so painful to be a Christian during lockdown is we can't gather together as our local church families. Because one thing that we are to do when we gather is we are to reinforce a message to each other about who we were, about who we are now. That we were once outsiders before God, spiritually unclean. But that now, because of Jesus, we're spiritually clean and we've been brought into his family. A church is to encourage each other through praying, through singing, through words of encouragement, through our gifts of the Spirit, through the preaching of the Bible. We are the people of God, not because we have earned it, because of the grace of God. In Cambodia, if you become a Christian and you're from a Buddhist family, there's a lot of pressure on you to revert back to your Buddhist faith. It's seen as turning your back on the way of your ancestors and the way of Cambodia, to turn from Buddhism to Christianity. How does a Cambodian Christian handle that pressure? How does a Christian in the UK handle the pressure of not making money, or power, or romance, or our career, our false gods, our idols? Or how do we handle the rejection that we will experience when we try and share the message with other people? We need the reinforcement of being in a church family to encourage us to stand firm in our faith. We all were once outsiders, now we're all insiders. What a great message. And then finally, this story helps us to think again about the message we have for the world around us. Although the UK is more of an individual culture, people still like to be part of a group and find some sense of identity and security in the group. It could be to do with all kinds of hobbies: gardening, jogging, running, reading, sewing, working out, all kinds of groups. And we kind of get a sense of identity from these groups. It was crazy when I first realised at the age of about 10 years old that when I was with the Luton Town fans most Saturdays as a kid, and we would sing, "It's Luton Town FC, we are by far the greatest team the world has ever seen." Even I realised then that Luton never were, never will be the world's greatest team, but the fans sing that to try and get the sense of we belong together to this important group. The message we have for the world is that there's only one group that really matters ultimately for our souls to belong to, and it's the people of God, who will live on for eternity and live on his new creation, seeing Jesus Christ with our own eyes face to face when he makes a new world, a new heavens and a new earth. The message is we have to lay down our allegiance to the other groups that we're in. We can still be part of them, but lay down our allegiance and make God, his family, our first allegiance. And the message is that you have God, the Creator, God, the Lord of hosts, as your Father. You have Jesus Christ, your big brother, who has all other spiritual powers under his feet. And just as the priest would put oil on the man of the healed leper, so God the Father, Jesus the Son, they send the Holy Spirit to us as a down payment, guaranteeing that we are in this family. In Hebrews, we read that Jesus was crucified outside the camp in disgrace, but we are told to go and meet him outside the camp in his shame. We have to understand we have a message for the world. It is good news, but that it will make us, in some people's eyes, outsiders. But the good news is we're in God's family. The message of Jesus healing this leper, sending him to the priest, helps us to see that Jesus on the cross became an outsider. to bring us in, and that he is our great high priest who declares us clean and in God's family. May God bless you as we try and understand more of what Jesus has done for us, as we try and let that affect how we treat each other, reinforcing that we are insiders in God's family. And as we handle the response of some people who won't like the message we have, that the people of God, that's the group we all need to belong to, and Jesus is the only way in. God bless you.